IQ Smart Parent is made possible in part by the McCune Foundation and the Grable Foundation.
Welcome to this special edition of IQ Smart Parent. I'm your host, Lisa Washington. Click, like, share. They're automatic actions for just about all of us as we take in the many different forms of media that surround us today. But today we're going to help you build crucial skills you can start using right now to become a smarter media consumer and a more responsible media maker. Because thanks to 21st century technology, we're all journalists now. We'll talk to the experts and we want to hear from you too. So send us your questions and comments through social media and we'll get them to our guests here in the studio. I am very happy to welcome our first guest. Barbara McCormack is the Vice President of Education at the Museum in Washington, D.C., an interactive museum devoted to the history and impact of news. Barbara, welcome. Thanks so much for joining us. We're talking about media literacy. Parents and young people hear that term, but they may not fully understand what it means. How do you and your colleagues at the museum define media literacy?
Sure. So it's the ability to access, evaluate, analyze, and share media. And by media, I don't mean just news. It could be from analyzing an ad you see on Metro to a popular TV show. It could also be propaganda, or it could be a historical document. Fake news is kind of this phenomenon has given rise to the need for news literacy, but media literacy is just a little bit more all-encompassing.
And we know that not all media and journalism are created equally. What are the dangers to an individual and to us in a society if people can't objectively evaluate and analyze the media they consume?
Sure, yeah. Access to reliable information is important to all of us. On a personal level, when making health decisions, I need to access reliable health information. If not, that could be detrimental to myself. And if I have an illness that's contagious, it could be detrimental to others. In addition to when it comes time to vote, when I'm going to, the voting booth, access to important information and reliable information about the candidates I get to pick and choose is also very important to help me make those decisions. Misinformation can undermine our democracy in many ways. One that we're seeing now is attempts to delegitimize mainstream media.
Yes.
We're seeing this, or elections themselves. We're trying to cast doubt over our election process. If we all need the ability to access and have base facts to operate from when having some of these critical discussions that impact us as a whole of these important social issues.
Absolutely. And the Stanford History Education Group conducted research about young people and media literacy. The executive study of that research said, and I'm quoting, "Overall, young people's ability to reason about the information on the internet can be summed up in one word: bleak."
No disrespect to Stanford, but I have more, our young folks, I got more faith in you.
Yes.
There. It is tough, but for everyone, statistics, polls online, it's tough to sort through those numbers, figuring out that information. I also think it's tough to sort through sponsored content, native advertising, that's
Right.
hard. Producers, we can help with that by better labeling that type of content.
And the way that you're helping, you have an ESCAPE. This is an acronym that is very helpful. Tell us about this tool.
Okay, well, it is a tool. It's meant as a suggested guide and types of questions to ask, but it's not a step-by-step process. As we know, tactics and techniques that trolls and troublemakers out there use change. So it's just a way of thinking when you come across any media.
Okay, so E is evidence. Do the facts hold up? Verify.
Yes, so you have to go in and look for those searchable facts, and then you do a quick internet search, see if those facts exist. If it's a questionable site, someone like Snopes or another fact check organization, you guys can look this up later, but I believe there's like 157 fact check organizations out there now, worldwide.
Wow, yes.
But they may have done that work for you and searched for the facts. If a general internet search doesn't turn up anything, then you can look for key facts in the article and search for those yourselves. A study. Does that study exist? What did the study actually say?
The evidence is important, also the source.
Absolutely, and you should not share if you don't know the source. first and foremost, if we can just get folks to pause and consider who the source is, where it comes from, then we've won half the battle. And it's not always that initial poster. So you have to sometimes do some digging.
And I understand we'll get to a social media question momentarily. The C in this is context.
Right. So you need to know the context in which the information is being delivered. And I like to use our consumers questions to help you get at that. And we've taken the basic reporters questions and turned those into consumers questions. So, who made this? How is it sourced? When was it? Why was it made? When? What's missing? And where do I go from here?
And just to finish this acronym, A is for audience, P is for purpose.
Right. What are they trying to do with this information? Is it informational? Is it funny? Are you trying to entertain me? Are you trying to persuade me, get me to buy something?
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for sharing that. Of course, the final E, we want to get to that as well as execution.
Exactly. How is this being delivered? Are we seeing, what's the tone? Are we seeing some really outlandish pictures to try to pull me in, or sensational headlines? So how is it being presented?
Okay, let's get to our social media question.
Okay, so this question is from Chris in Illinois. We seem to live in an age where not only kids, but also adults can't tell the difference between facts and opinion. How do we convince adults that they need media literacy training before they can teach their kids about media literacy?
That's a great question. Thank you, and I agree that our adults need to do it, but I'm not sure if they need it before they do kids. Maybe they can do it side by side.
Okay.
I think this is something that it's an intergenerational issue, and we should be learning and these skills and these tactics together. Students may be able to bring some of these tactics home to their parents, or help out their grandparents and share some of the tips and tricks that they're learning from their teachers and librarians.
So that way they are both learning.
Absolutely, and we do need some more adult programs out there in our libraries and other places where adults can find reliable sources and websites to access information when they themselves have questions.
Let's get to another social media question.
All right, this one is submitted by Anna, just a student in Pennsylvania. She asked, what added details make fake news more believable to young people?
Added details.
Yeah, I know. These quotes, there's a quote there, there's a number, there's a statistic. It's a really eye-catching picture that can make it more believable, or it can appear to be coming from a news source, or extra use of exclamations and those tactics to get my attention. But if you have a good quote or a number on there, sometimes we just on send before even bothering to open and read deeper.
And so we're going to get to another social media question, but of course we want to remind our viewers that you can submit your questions about media literacy through social media. I also want to ask you, Barbara, what do you believe are the most frequently misinterpreted types of messages that people encounter in media?
And again, I think I touched on that a little bit earlier. It's those statistics in polls. Those are tough for anyone to sort through, and that's why doing a thorough search on that information and looking at internet search and seeing where they show up and how they're being used and what study they're coming from is very important. And is it even a reputable a group who conducted the study or the survey? That's all important to kind of suss through.
Okay, looks like we have another question from social media.
This question was submitted by Zach. Is it responsible to encourage young people to doubt what they see in the media, and how will they become informed if they question everything they see?
Right. Perfect. Thank you, Zach, because that's exactly, we don't want to create cynics. We don't want to be unicorns. We don't want to bounce around out there and like and share everything without digging a little deeper, but we can't be cynics. And the way to combat that are better skills. So we can trust our ability to dig through that information and figure out if it's real or not. If there's any doubt, we just need to not share or comment on until we have the opportunity to dig deeper to the real issue. But yes, a cynic is not the way to go, and we have a lot of those right now.
Yes.
And it's not our young people.
Now, this is good for evaluating words, but what about when we want to evaluate images that we see in media?
Sure. You can do a great reverse image search right now. And if you're in Chrome, you can right-click and it will tell you where that image comes from and if it's been used before. If you're using another browser, you can upload it in Google Images and search. There's other resources like 10i.com. And don't underestimate using those journalistic skills to look at a picture yourself to see if anything's out of place and make sure that everything that it says it's representing, it's representing.
Now that's the what we should do, but let's focus on the more difficult task of how we do it.
Right.
You want to be able to understand what those research tools are so that you know that you're finding the credible source.
Right. And good internet search always is helpful. Starting there is the best place to start, and it will raise red flags right from the get-go. And most likely another fact-checking organization's already looked at this information, and you can see the facts they examined and the conclusions they came up with. If not, you're going to have other reputable news sources that are picking up some of this information, and that's also an indicator that what you're looking at is reliable.
And so let's talk about how you can walk people through so they understand the big picture of exactly what media literacy is.
Right. So media literacy really is just a lot of common sense. I know it seems scary, and a lot of us want to make it sound like it's multiple step process and it's going to take forever to master. It's just teaching some good common sense and identifying some of the potential issues out there. So if we are good at critical thinking, looking at everything with that reporter's eye, who made this? That's really important to know. What's the source? What's missing? Looking for what's not there, what's not being told, and where can you teaching our young people where to go to find more information about what's missing. Those are the real key skills that we need.
Okay, let's take another question from social media.
So this is from Brandon, a student in Pennsylvania. What is the best way to quickly achieve media literacy?
Well, I'd love to see it mandated. I'd love to see it in schools. I think that would be great. I do think our teachers need more time and resources to teach media literacy. A lot are already incorporating it into their other subjects, but having a dedicated class would go a long way. And then you need then that high stakes test behind it. Yes, another high stakes so that it's important to everyone. But it needs to start there. We need to say, if we can't all access reliable information, then we can't have very crucial conversations. Then our democracy is threatened. If we have different facts, how can we come together to solve our biggest issues?
Do you think that we'll see that in coming years? Media literacy courses taught at even the lowest levels?
I hope so. I know some are doing it now. There's lots of bills out there on the books. There's lots of folks who are pushing these issues all around the country. So we're watching those closely and hope that they succeed.
Excellent. Now, do people come into the museum, are they asking about fake news? Are they curious?
Absolutely, they're curious. And it's from, our teachers are coming and taking our classes. Visitors are looking for the information. We know fake news is a boiled down term.
Yes.
Which I know some people cringe. I know my academics don't like that. But if it's the hook to start the conversation, then that's fine. That's the hook that we'll take. Because then we can get into the bigger issues of flawed reporting, of bias, then we can have those meatier conversations. But being boiled down, an access point for us all to start from and then start peeling back the layers and discussing the bigger issue is great. And we do that in our classes. We do that on site and we do that online. We have folks taking our online class from all around the country, all around the world. I just got back from Belarus. Those students there are the same issues that they're trying to grapple with. So globally, I think we're really focusing on these issues and trying to be better consumers of information.
Barbara, thank you so much. Again, we want to remind you that you can submit your questions about media literacy through social media. But up first, we have more tips about detecting fake news. And we took our cameras to the streets to hear more about how people consume and create media. Check this out.
Here are 5 ways to spot fake news. Number 1, look for unusual URLs. If they end with .lo or .com.co, chances are they aren't legitimate news sites. Number 2, dissect the layout. Look for grammatical errors, incorrect dates, bold claims with no sources, and sensationalist images. These are all red flags. Number 3, dig deeper. Find out who wrote the article and who supports the site. If this information doesn't exist, or you need to register to get it, then question why. Number 4, cross-check. Use fact-checking sites to confirm information and see whether other credible news outlets are reporting similar news. Number 5, try a reverse image search. If the same picture appears in unrelated stories, you may have a reason to be suspicious.
I've gotten to the place where there's just so much media intake all the time that I feel like I'll have a decent enough view of what's going on in the world just by listening to what other people saw in the media.
There are definitely places I go online, such as like the New York Times or the Wall Street Journal. You can find the online editions. I know back in high school, my school had a subscription to the Wall Street Journal online, so I was able to get my news through there. But I think definitely there's a very big mix of print media and online media that you can find nowadays.
Mixture of TV and online, just the UK news service for us. Obviously, it's the main one for us, and you get pretty much everything you need from there.
I mainly go to Reddit. Reddit seems to be pretty applicable because it's really not funded by anybody. Other than that, unfortunately, like I read a lot of my news on Snapchat.
I would say, yeah, I'm pretty apt at being able to tell what's real and what's fake.
I'm kind of like the worst at that kind of like situation. Like I'll read into certain things, especially like if it involves like Pitt, my community, or just like family with like abroad or something like that, or just like in my local community.
I am a thinking human being, somewhat intelligent. So yes, I am a great spotter of fake news.
I don't know, if you want to put me to the test, we can see, but you know, I think it's always good to check something twice if you see like a certain headline.
Me personally, I don't really like share events or just like anything that I know or like might be suspicious of. It's only something that either like I have created, like one of my like immediate friends has like created an event, and then I like will go ahead and share that information.
Quite amount of you know, just the basic news stories. I mean, with your election, a lot of that came through stuff being shared on Facebook. And
I think it's really easy with Facebook and other tools like social media. It's really easy to spread messages amongst one another, and oftentimes, unfortunately, those messages can be fake.
I cross-reference it against the internet. I'll do like a Google search, or I'll ask someone I know who I know has a little bit more expertise in the particular field, and I'll say, what do you know about this? You know, how accurate is this?
I try to look at multiple sources and kind of stand back and make my own conclusion based upon what I'm reading and what I'm watching on TV.
First, I definitely look at the author because I think that's one of the first things you see. Hopefully you can find some sort of accreditation on that site itself, but if not, you can also like look online to see if the author is a credible source.
I usually cross-reference on multiple sites, whether I hear like a piece of news about like something that's recently going on in like the political field or political sphere or something like that. I'll cross-reference it on multiple sites.
As a parent, my kids now are you know, adult children, but I think I would have been more attentive to what they were doing online and on Facebook and in social media.
There should be a serious conversation between parents and children about where they go to get their news, and a family discussion about what the current events are in news and in the home.
If I were a parent, to tell my child to check multiple sources and see if this article that, say, if it's from The Onion or something, that it's actually true.
I think it's about teaching our kids, especially the younger folks, to discern between facts and feelings. Because, I mean, it only takes you one time and then you're discredited, you know? Nobody will believe you after that. Or, you know, he'll be like, all right, well, I know no matter what, like this person, you know, nothing that they say or nothing that they put on Facebook is really credible anymore.
It's really important to kind of counteract and kind of think like why they're thinking this way, and not just like kind of get brainwashed into thinking their way.
It's not just about the news, the credibility of the news, it's about my credibility, right? Because I don't want to be someone who posts stuff and then later on retracts on it. Unlike a lot of people who do right now.
I think it's important because you don't want to start spreading false narratives and false news because it's important for people to be well informed.
Here are 5 questions to have kids ask anytime they're viewing media. Number 1, who created the message? Help kids pull back the curtain and see that all media has an author and an agenda. Number 2, Why was the message made? Was it to inform us, to entertain, or persuade? Also, have kids consider the intended audience. Number 3, who's paying for it? Help them follow the money and think about the motives behind the message. What else does the funder do? Show kids how to dig for this info. Number 4, how is the message trying to get my attention? Show kids how all types of media, from videos to apps and beyond, use different techniques to keep us engaged. And number 5, who's represented in the message and who's missing? Whose points of views and values are included? And what can this tell us about the media? To really empower your kids, have them create their own media and have them reflect on their work with these same questions in mind.
Can you tell the difference between fact and opinion? We're about to find out. Barbara McCormick is still with us. She is the Vice President of Education at the Museum in Washington, D.C. We're also joined by Jennifer Snyder-Duch, a media scholar at Carlow University in Western Pennsylvania. And I'm also happy to welcome Tony Norman, an award-winning journalist from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. Tony has written a general interest column there since 1996. So we're talking about biases here. We know that recognizing bias is another component of media literacy. What makes it difficult for people to distinguish fact from opinion and to detect bias in the media? Why don't you jump in, Tony?
Sure. A certain amount of bias is unavoidable because we're human beings. So, I mean, you learn to live with the assumption that there's some bias involved in everything. But what you also want to do is educate yourself by encountering as many models of argument as you possibly can. Read broadly, consume media broadly, but also critically. And the only way you can become really media literate is to understand what the underlying assumptions are that emanate from said media. So you have to sort of expose yourself, inoculate yourself against everything by reading and experiencing everything and understanding where it comes from. Because the media environment is messy. It's always going to be messy. It's never going to be this pure distillation of logical argumentation.
Jennifer, do you agree?
Yes, and because we have such we can check various sources with such ease, we can become informed about issues. We don't have to follow a particular source or a particular source or two. We can become educated about particular issues that are important to us or new issues that we run into as we explore the media on a daily basis, so that when we're reading a source about a particular issue in education, politics, health, we know something about that and can question some of the information that might be presented in a way that we perceive as biased.
Okay. We have a question from the audience.
My question was, I want to know if media literacy has an effect on cyberbullying, and if it does, how can we use media literacy to combat cyberbullying?
Good question.
I didn't hear the first part. Does media have an effect on what?
On cyberbullying.
Cyberbullying.
Yes, and if so, how can you use media literacy to combat that?
Wow. You know, I actually think that, I mean, that's an extremely complicated question. I mean, you know, law enforcement and parents and, you know, the media, we're all struggling with that question. There isn't an easy answer. But I think if young people understand that their words have implications, have impact outside of what they may even believe it to be, once young people become conscious of the fact that they can really affect someone's life in a major way with what they write, even if they think that they're just kidding around, if people take moral responsibility for their words in cyberspace, I think that will begin to affect cyberbullying, but it won't end it. I think bullying is a part of the human condition.
Yes, and I know you're a columnist, so I'm sure you get quite a number of comments.
I get my share of bullying, and you know,
How do you respond?
Well, right now I have the comments section of my column locked because there's so many haters out there and so much, bullying. I mean, people who may object to my column on the basis of my race or on the basis of my opinion, or is he a liberal or is he a conservative? And so a lot of people will bully on the basis of that. And it's not that I'm against the free expression of opinion, but sometimes it crosses the line and gets into really ridiculous territory.
Okay.
So
let's get to another question from our audience.
I wanted to know why y'all start this program.
why we started this program, to spread more about media literacy. But why don't we get you, Barbara, to sort of explain the museum, and then you have the Museum Ed, the educational tool of that.
Right, so it's starting to build awareness and the importance for the cause, having these conversations. Again, I don't think a lot of this is really tough, but just setting off those aha moments when people can realize what's happening, how they're being manipulated, and then at the museum, we take media literacy one step further because we're also champions of the First Amendment, and not just understanding how to access the reliable information, but why it's important and what it protects, and the whole reasoning behind why we care, why it matters.
And I would also add to that we have a lot of young people in our audience today, and certainly we talk to adults about these types of topics all the time. It's good to have a younger audience that we can spread this message and make them more informed.
Right.
I think it's important too that we don't forget for programs like the museum and other programs that encourage youth to be media literate, that doesn't just mean the media that we consume, but the media that we create. And I think that we as adults are in a position to create scaffolding, create opportunities for youth voices to be valued.
Yes.
And that's part of the media literacy landscape nowadays too, because it's so easy to create messages and have them distributed and potentially have them distributed to large audiences. And so we should be open to hearing what youth have to say and creating avenues for them to say it responsibly and in a way that's well informed.
And that's why we are doing this. Let's get to another social media question.
All right, this one is submitted by Lee from New York. She asks, the kids in my family like to use their devices for gaming and social sites, but what is the right age to start steering them towards using their devices to consume news?
The right age.
I know that's such a
I think, you know, yeah, it's such a personal, I think that depending upon the capacity of the young person, you know, to understand, I think starting off at the dinner table and just having conversations among the family will prepare you for media literacy in a way that will really, really help. And then at that point, I think once you have children who can just have a conversation with their parents, I think at that moment, when you can have a logical conversation with them, you introduce them to media, because then you can have the capacity to have that overarching conversation
because
that's necessary. Because they will already have the foundation because they talk at the dinner table.
Yes.
So it can't be in a vacuum. You can't just throw a kid, you know, onto some cyber platform and expect them to get anything out of it if they don't understand the whole idea of narrative and dialogue.
Right. Now, when it comes to opinions, certainly no one enjoys being told that their opinion isn't worthy. And research shows media consumers tend to fill their social streams with information and opinions that feed only their narrow interests and viewpoints, rather than seeking new ideas, interests, events, or diverse viewpoints. It's a phenomenon called journalism of affirmation. And I'm sure that you all can talk about that and relate to that, because sometimes it can be difficult to, you know, go outside of your comfort zone or listen to a diverse opinion.
Right, and to begin, and I'll let our journalist answer that, but can we blame people for the stream of information that's coming at us? We need to filter in some way, and we have the right to get information that we like, that confirms what we believe. That's the beauty of it. But we also have the right then to the responsibility to explore other folks' opinions and viewpoints if we're going to be active and productive citizens in our democracy.
Barb said it better than I could say. You really do need to read broadly. You have to understand the other person's perspective. Empathy is a word that I would, you have to truly understand where people are coming from.
And when you talk about that in terms of social media, you have to follow and engage with sources that you think their viewpoint is different from your own. Otherwise, you'll be fed sources again and again that as we're talking about, that affirm your position. So you really have to have very conscious social media skills if you're going to live in the social media environment, which most of us do, as we know.
You certainly need those social media skills. We have another question from our audience.
The question I have is, like, do you think that teenagers can use social media to make a difference in the world?
Absolutely.
I think we're seeing it.
Absolutely.
I think we're seeing it right now.
Yeah. I mean, the whole Parkland, Florida, uprising on the part of the students
Yes.
who are going to Tallahassee, to the state capitol, and demanding a change in the gun laws there in Florida. That's probably the best example of contemporary use of social media by young people. The reason that this particular shooting has moved the needle on the gun reform debate is because these young people are social media savvy in a way that little children aren't, and in a way that their parents aren't. And so they know how to seize control of the media narrative and to work it to their advantage.
So let's talk now about propaganda. And Barbara, I know the museum has another acronym to help people recognize propaganda. Tell us what SEED stands for.
So again, SEED is meant to help consumers identify the tactics behind propaganda. We don't want to again get into the debate. My academics are going to say this is propaganda, that's not. If it's marketing, we won't get into that. But S stands for simplification. We're seeing complex issues that are being boiled down into a picture and a catchy slogan. We know that's not how these issues work. We're seeing exaggeration of information, like on the side of one campaign that they can't be beat, or that their side is right.
Okay.
We're seeing exploitation, so they're taking information and exploiting it, and then we're seeing division. This tactic is probably the most damaging. They're creating an us and them kind of environment. You're with us or you're against us. It's one way or the other. It's not promoting finding common ground, and I think that's why we're seeing such a polarization today.
Okay, we have another question from our audience.
Hi. Question: do you believe that if we were to find a way to find the individuals that are spreading all this fake information, that would slow down or even put a stop to this?
If we were able to slow down the information, is that your?
If we were to find a way to find people that are spreading all this stuff out.
Oh, to find the people who are spreading it, to stop it from spreading. Is that even possible?
The world population, we're in near 7 billion now,
Right.
and you figure about 4 billion of those people have access, to new media, the internet, and so forth. So the short answer is no. You can't stop it at the source because there's just too many people. You just have to learn how to handle it, how to tackle it, how to differentiate true from false, and move from there.
And we're, in this day and age, we're all responsible to figure out how we are going to take part in the conversation. And that certainly, not only does that include our young people, I would say that they should be the front runners in terms of adding their own voices that will help us to make some important distinctions and understand perspectives that we need to make decisions in our lives.
Because they matter as well. We have another question from social media.
This question was submitted by Allison through Twitter. A lot of people these days like to label news they disagree with as fake, just because it challenges what they believe, which often leads to echo chambers. How can you ensure that children that use social media aren't making the mistake inadvertently, and what effect can those echo chambers have on them at such an early age?
I think that programs, like the programs that happen at the museum and in other Common Sense Media and other sources, really help in this cause. That is something that is a problem, that we call everything that we don't like fake,
Yes.
and that is not true. There are other ways to evaluate our news, our entertainment media, and it might not be fake, but it might be biased, or it might be of poor quality, or it
Yes.
might not be, we might not think it's at a good level of culture. And so media literacy programs, as Barbara talked about in the first segment, are absolutely critical, so that this becomes not sort of an add-on to our education or to our way of life, but a part of the way that we all think, young people and old.
Right. I think without media literacy, you're basically at the whims, at the mercy of whatever media is coming your way. And so we have to develop a new paradigm. We have to understand that we have to approach information critically. And if we learn that at an early age, if we are taught media literacy at an early age, and we are exposed to media in a responsible way, it really does make our democracy more viable, because without media literacy, we have an unviable democracy.
I want to ask a question. I want to get all three of you to weigh in very quickly. What do you think is a way that we can evaluate if something is newsworthy and is worth sharing? Is it share worthy? How do you evaluate and determine that?
Wow, I've been guilty of passing along stuff that was, a few weeks ago I passed around some information that Morgan Freeman, the actor, had died. It was completely false. I did not check the source before I spread it on Facebook. And so even someone who is sophisticated is going to make that mistake. So we all have to question what it is that we're confronted with and if it's true or not, and then we have to do the conscientious thing.
And a quick answer from you, Barbara.
We just have to stop and pause and think about the source. It doesn't have to take very long. We know that in a Columbia University study shows that 59% of Twitter stories that are shared are actually clicked on. So if we can just start with stop and think before you share. And if you can't quickly discern whether or not it's share worthy, then don't.
Right.
And I'm the other tactic. I sometimes will just stop and not share and be like, we'll tuck that one away.
Right.
Stop and think. That's some good advice. Now, coming up, find out how media affects the way kids feel about themselves and learn how kids can take charge of the media by becoming responsible media makers. But up first, discover ways to help young people cope with the negative and even frightening information they see in the news.
A recent study revealed the alarming impact negative and frightening news stories can have on kids. 63% of the young people polled said the news makes them feel afraid, angry, sad, or depressed. Remember, in times of crisis, how adults react has an impact on how your kids will react. If you stay calm and rational, your kids probably will too. The National Association of School Psychologists offers more tips for helping kids cope with negative news. Reassure your children that they are safe. Reinforce that message by reviewing safety precautions in place at home and at school. Explain serious news events in a way that is appropriate for your child's age. Limit television viewing of violent events. And remember that if you are watching the news, your children might overhear it even if they're in another room. And finally, make time for kids to talk about their feelings and ask questions. Senseless violence is hard for anyone to understand, but experts say in troubling times, kids worry less when families stick to normal daily routines and they spend time with family and friends. Did you know the average 8-year-old spends 8 hours a day engaged in media? Teenagers typically spend 11 hours a day engaged in media. 73% of teens have access to a smartphone. And 13 to 17-year-olds send an average of 3,300 texts each month.
Media is so prevalent in our culture today.
It's not just a television show anymore. It's not just a movie when you go to the cinema, but it's YouTube, it's Facebook, it's Twitter. And it's really critical that we tell our own stories. And students from disadvantaged communities, it's important that their stories are told. The Youth Leading Change pathway is about youth voice. So it's teaching the students how to express their voice in the digital environment that they live in.
They are constantly confronted with images that they might not even realize how they're kind of seeping into their perceptions of themselves. To be able to understand how media is created, kind of going around the back door and looking at, what it takes to make images and create media is really important to be able to work towards developing a positive sense of self.
If you want to do beat production, you can do beat production. If you want to do like Photoshop or any type of editing program, you could do that. Whatever you want to do, technology-wise, you can do it here.
We look at real news and fake news today in politics, and we show our side of it. It helps us prepare for the real world and figure out what is going on in our lives, so we're not like misinformed on anything.
These are digital literacies that are essential for students to have so that their voice is heard and it's not drowned out by their lack of access to it.
Learning pathways are something that give kids kernels of knowledge, and they follow that process throughout to kind of open their eyes. They're able to truly understand kind of how that learning connects to them as a young person and connects to the broader world.
Learning pathway is when they work, it says, hey, this is for you. Whatever you want is for you. And there are people around you who are here and ready to help you get to that.
The majority of coverage of communities of color, African American communities, deal with news related to criminality. So it's time to change these old narratives for new and more empowering narratives, and giving the students the microphone, giving them the camera, giving them the smartphone and the ability to tweet and Snapchat and Instagram their stories is a big part of doing that.
According to a report by Common Sense Media, teens spend 11 hours a day engaged in social media, and that's time spent consuming and creating messages. So we want to close out today's special edition of IQ Smart Parents by helping young people become more responsible and effective media makers. Our media scholar, Jennifer Snyder-Duch, is still with us. I'm also happy to welcome Larry Berger, who is the founder and executive director of the public radio program Saturday Light Brigade and Youth Express, a streaming internet radio service featuring original writing, music, and journalism from young people. And welcome Dr. Temple Lovelace, an associate professor of special education at Duquesne University in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And Dr. Lovelace, or should I call you Temple?
Temple works.
Okay, Temple, I'll ask you, you have a special interest in social justice and in equity. You developed this curriculum, Youth Leading Change, that we just saw in that video. What's the key to getting students to make media that contributes authentic perspectives and counters stereotypes?
Absolutely. So our first thing is that we start with students making the best story, which starts with their story.
Okay.
So when somebody starts with telling a story about themselves, they understand integrity. They understand wanting to be shown, what is right about the story. So that way they understand how should stories about others be. They should have integrity. They should show the true story. And so that's what's important for us at Youth Leading Change.
So when young people have the ability to amplify and to spread their messages through media, how does that impact the community?
I think it does in a lot of ways. I mean, first, when you give youth that opportunity, you're showing their voices matter, and therefore they themselves matter as a result of that. And in terms of impact on the community, a lot of folks, particularly if they only see youth through the lens of television or other secondary sources rather than one-on-one, they're going to just see small samples of the extremes, either the honor roll student that has won scholarships to 10 universities, or a student that has had some problems owing to poverty or legal problems, perhaps. They're not going to see the reality in between. And when students make their own authentic media, they get to be themselves.
Jennifer, what do you think?
I think that it's important, when we are working with youth to create media and to advocate for change, we are not doing it to do them a favor, right? It's not an exercise. We are doing it because if we don't hear the perspectives of the students who are the youth and the students who are living in our communities and living in our schools, we're not getting the whole picture of what's happening in our community, and we don't know how to properly solve problems.
Okay, we have another question from the audience.
Some parents tend to move media away from their children. I want to ask, what can we do to help motivate parents that some media can actually be good for your children, and instead of putting it away, they should actually teach children about these types of media?
We know we've heard those reports about screen time, mom or dad maybe taking away that smartphone or reducing the amount of time that kids are online. What do you think about that? What are your thoughts?
For me, it's important for us to understand that we do live in a mediated world and we do live in a digital world, and it's part of our environment. So if it were something we can choose to create time for media and then time for not media, that would be very helpful. However, as we talked about in the last segment in terms of how to talk to kids and how young to talk to them about media literacy, we don't really have a choice. Whether they're being exposed directly, they hear what's going on in our media and they're exposed to various media conventions and topics. And so we need to engage in that conversation regularly, yet we might encourage habits that say that certain media use certain access to certain screens or devices is a choice, not just something that's in our environment whenever we have free time. It's a choice that we use for a particular time for a particular purpose.
I like that idea of designating the time. Let's get to another question from social media.
Okay, so Dr. Deb from Twitter, what is important for aspiring teachers to know about effective use of social media in their classrooms?
So I will say, for us at Duquesne University, our goal is to have experience. So our teachers, obviously, they are consumers of media, but they don't know how to teach media. How do I use this to further content, whether it's math, whether it's social studies? And so that's one of the things that we do is we allow time in our schools, in our university courses, for them to be able to play around with using it as a teaching tool, not just a consumer tool.
Because there's a lot difference in being a consumer versus teaching media.
Absolutely.
We have another question from our audience.
My question is, how do you feel about the fact that most media is controlled? Like when you wake up in the morning, the news stations put what they want you to see on the TV station. And I just wanted to know how you felt.
That's a very good question. We only have a certain level of choice, right? We're choosing among the media sources that are available to us. And so asking questions about, as Barbara talked about in the first segment, what is the purpose will help us to make a determination of why this is being presented to us. Much of the media presented to us that comes from the mainstream media is there to sell something, and so we should be very conscious of that. We don't have to disregard it, but we should be conscious of what that purpose is there, and that might skew what the content that we get. But also, again, an environment, it creates the importance of us joining into the conversation and finding ways to create our own media with our own perspectives and get it distributed in ways that it might reach a potential audience who needs it.
Because we can create our own media. Let's take another question from social media.
So this question was submitted by Laura from Virginia, and it's specifically for Larry Berger. She says, what topics and themes are you seeing young people address through their digital art? Are they using their art for social activism?
Well, there's a lot of common themes. I mean, one certainly is violence, not just post-Parkland, but at least for 5+ years, students talking about violence. Another is equity, and in Pittsburgh, that includes areas of race as well as neighborhood and social status. Another key one, I think in addition to those two, we've had some interesting thoughts about country of origin and immigration in students. It's sort of a subset of equity, but that's coming up quite a bit too in terms of how do we embrace different cultures and get along. Kids are in many ways more socially aware than some of the adults in their midst. They are really leading the way with some great topics.
And I know that you also work to teach kids about artistic media as well, and I want to know what you all think about the level of implication of the various types of media that children are exposed to.
That's a good question. I think sometimes, I think Marshall McLuhan talked a lot about the media being the message being the media, I think is how the phrase goes. And some of the media that is created that we're all exposed to can be so slick and well packaged and direct that the message within it may not be as strong as the media itself. And on the opposite end, something that isn't quite as slick and well packaged might not be as respected, even though the message is very accurate. When we work with kids in media, we really want to make sure that they have their audience in mind so that their very strong, authentic message is not inadvertently weakened by the method they use to present it to others.
Okay, we have another question from the audience.
Hi, I think there are people who don't trust journalists and don't trust the media they're consuming as a result of fake news and more. So can you talk a little bit about that distrust and useful ways to combat it?
Building trust with journalists.
Yeah, I think that in part of our teaching and learning about in the realm of media literacy for adults and youth of all ages, it's important for us to understand that it's not a choice whether we have journalism or not, that has to be part of the lesson, that there's a role for journalism in our democratic society that serves a very important need to make sure that we are well informed and that we challenge decisions and actions that come from our leaders, business leaders and political leaders. And so we have to start at that level before then we could add the layers of questioning that are needed in order to make good decisions about the news media. So just to jump to the questioning, I think that's a good question, because then it leads us to just think, well, it's all a terrible system and we don't need it. But we do need it, and we need to make that part of our literacy lessons from the get-go.
And so then I would ask, how do we get the young people to take their media making to the next level? If you're going to be sharing your stories in your media, how do you take it to the next level?
Well, developing basic skills in writing and understanding what it is that you want to convey. And as Temple said earlier, starting with a biography, you are the expert. Nobody can present your own autobiography as well as you can. But to make sure you can't build a slick story atop no substance. So making sure that your facts are correct, that you've actually storyboarded everything out, and going through that whole process will make sure that the story, I'm a big believer, if you follow the right process, you'll almost always hit a home run. But it's all just following that process.
Substance is important. Let's go to a social media question.
This is a question from a parent in Philadelphia named Penny. What online programs do you suggest for preteens to become good digital citizens and smart consumers?
Temple, why don't you take that one?
Well, I would say there's lots of programs out there that allow preteens to see what's going on. I'm a believer that there aren't necessarily programs out there just for teens. I think teens should be able to look at everything that's out there and have it be applicable to what they need in terms of understanding media literacy.
Jennifer, any thoughts? Or
well, there are a couple. CommonSenseMedia.org has some great resources, and MediaLiteracyNow.org has a compendium, probably dozens of programs listed, but doing it together with peers and adults and younger people, to me, makes sense. We're all learning the same type of thing together.
And don't forget to look back at your local community. Organizations like the Saturday Light Brigade Radio that allow youth to engage in media making and thinking critically about media and expressing their own voices are very important. And one thing that we worry about in our media environment is the importance of the stories that are critical to local communities being lost. So when you're looking for programs, don't forget to look at your own community.
So then to that point, what advice would you offer for parents about helping their children take a more active role in sort of the information cycle? Larry was just saying, you know, follow the facts, know what you're researching. How do you help parents help their children?
A couple of tips I would give to parents or adults, teachers or adults who work with students in after-school programs who might be taking on a media project or think that there's some potential for media work. A couple things. One thing is to to make sure that the voices of the youth are authentic. Sometimes when and this has been going on for decades, even sort of prior to our social media, to the social media environment we live in, we often design programs so that as an exercise, so that kids get some experience with the technology or creating a particular medium. But as Larry was talking about the substance, we can't forget, what do they have to say? That's what's critical to it, and making sure there's an audience, so that if your son or daughter or your students want to create a blog or a film about an issue that's concerning to them, make sure that it's going to be distributed to somebody that could hear it and or see it or read it. And the other view I have is to make sure that they have time to kind of play around with it and fail, both with the ideas and with whatever technology that they're using. This is so critical.
And time is certainly important. Exactly. Let's get to another question from our audience.
Hi. How do you believe that children can open and like proactive conversation about fake news, especially in a media age where a lot of adults are reluctant to listen to them?
I'd like to weigh in.
Well, I think the first is you need some kind of forum, right, where youth and adults are together. Maybe a facilitator, but I think people want to talk about these issues. If I were with a group of teens, my question might simply be, tell me what you think about the news stories that you encounter. And then I would shut up. And it might take a minute or two. I think one of the things that a lot of adults sometimes forget, media is so fast-paced
Yes.
as we do things. However, real human beings talking with one another need awkward silences and need thinking time.
All right, don't want to cut you off. A very quick 20 seconds. Final thoughts, Jennifer.
Yeah, so I think that the key here is making sure that we are aware of the media environment that we live in. We don't deny it, but we figure out ways to engage and to engage in healthy ways that make sure that we understand the information that's being accessed to us, but that we are also taking part in that conversation.
Temple.
I think we have to trust young people. Young people have a voice. They have a voice we need to listen to. And so I think trusting them is the most important thing that I could say today moving forward, and allowing parents to open up that conversation with their children.
Excellent. Thank you so much. We all know that our lives and our society are shaped by the media we see and the messages we spread. Visit us online for more information and links to resources to help young people, families, and educators make media literacy a part of everyday life. For IQ Smart Parents, I'm Lisa Washington. Thanks for joining us.
Want to learn more about IQ Smart Parent? Visit us online at iqsmartparent.org for more episodes and additional tools and resources. Connect with us on Facebook, Twitter, and Pinterest to share your thoughts on being a 21st century parent. IQ Smart Parent is made possible in part by the McCune Foundation and the Grable Foundation.